So I've recently released a mainline Yakuza ranking which, sadly, not a lot of people have seen as the algorithm wasn't very kind to it. However, making that ranking gave me an itch to play a Yakuza title, and since I hadn't played Lost Judgment yet, that seemed like the perfect moment to check the game out. I personally thought the first Judgment game was mostly fine. The combat was a bit more unforgiving than I expected, and the narrative was too convoluted for my taste, but I would still call that game a mostly solid experience that you should check out if you haven't. I'm glad to say that Lost Judgment to me trumps the first one in almost every way, so stick around for another fix of RGG melodramatic insanity. In Lost Judgment, we once again follow disgraced lawyer turned private investigator Takayuki Yagami, who this time around has to solve a crime with a pretty alluring premise. Kihiro Ehara, the most obvious suspect of a murder in Yokohama, has been caught up by the police committing a completely unrelated crime in Tokyo, which gives him an airtight alibi and shows everyone how flawed the Japanese legal system can be. Yagami will then have to infiltrate a high school filled with bullies in Yokohama, where the murder victim used to work, to try and solve the case. Along the way, he'll be aided by all the major players from the first entry in the series, as well as some new faces like English teacher Sawa, handyman Kuwana, and mystery geek Amasawa. I don't want to get into too many details here because I feel like the way the story unfolds in the first act is best appreciated if you go in blind, but really, I thoroughly enjoy the plot in this one. It does start out a little bit slow though. There's a lot of unnecessary exposition and repetition. Like, there's this one scene with Sawa-sensei on the school rooftop that goes on for like 10 minutes and doesn't really add much. It could definitely have been worked on a little bit more, you know. There's a fine line between character work and needless exposition that's hard to walk and that RGG normally doesn't have a problem with. But I did feel like they struggle a bit with that in this game. Fortunately, when the story goes into high gear at around chapter 6 or 7, it doesn't let up until the end. Overall, the story is well written enough that you can forgive the typical RGG plot contrivances and conveniences, and I feel like that classic RGG development from mundane problem that inevitably scales up until the whole fate of Japan is in the hands of the protagonist is probably one of the most reasonable and grounded in the whole Yakuza franchise. In this case, the connection between the Yokohama murder and the sexual battery in Kamurocho doesn't feel forced, and the game actually invites you to try and figure out what's happening, and when you start getting answers, they feel sensible and logical. I don't know, it worked really well for me, and by the end of the game, Lost Judgment was giving me 24 vibes. Man, I miss that show. You can sense that a lot of care was put in the story and the way in which it is presented, and I really appreciate that. Lost Judgment was the last Yakuza game with any involvement from series creator Toshihiro Nagoshi, as he left Sega shortly after Lost Judgment to start his own studio. To be honest, I think it's interesting that he had a hand in writing both Judgment games, since he pretty much stopped being directly involved with the Yakuza games as early as the PS3 days, but felt engaged enough with the setup in Judgment that he decided to give it a moment of his time. And since Judgment works with isolated cases, the game doesn't need to worry about an ongoing narrative between titles, like Dojo Clan being in the middle of a major crisis every goddamn mainline Yakuza game. That makes Judgment much easier to follow and recommend to people than the mainline series in a sense. Actually, I can see a lot more longevity in Judgment as a series than Yakuza right now. It can go on indefinitely, even if Yagami leaves because the voice actor's talent agency in Japan is more afraid of the internet than Nintendo. This thing can keep going, maybe with Kaito and Sugiura as the main investigators with a more involved help from Genda Law Agency to take care of the legal side of things. Who knows? I just hope RGG doesn't drop this thing. So, I enjoy the main story and feel like it's one of the better ones in the series. The gameplay, however, continues to be pretty frustrating when it comes to the detective side of things. Just like in Judgment, you can't really miss or deduct information wrongly. The game won't let you move on until you have found all the clues Yagami needs to advance the investigation, which is weird. If we're being honest, the Judgment games aren't really detective games because the player has very little input or agency in solving the mystery. If you don't know what the right answer is, or more appropriately, the right question to ask is at any given moment, you just have to exhaust all the options given until you get the correct one. There's no tension or the feeling that you may screw things up. Accordingly, there are no good or bad endings. The story is on rails the whole time. And while that's not an issue for a mainline Yakuza title, even for an RPG like Yakuza 7, for a game about a private investigator trying to solve a murder that's more intricate than one of those traps in a Saw movie, that becomes a problem. And it's not just the deduction aspect that's flawed. The chase sequences and the tailing ones are just as bad as they were in the original Judgment. One might wonder why RGG hasn't tried to at least fine-tune these systems, but oh well, here we are with an alleged detective game in which all of the gameplay aspects related to investigating are the worst parts of the game. It would be like if the web-slinging was shit in Sony's Spider-Man, or if you didn't feel like a samurai during combat in Ghost of Tsushima. You cannot live out your noir detective fantasies through Yagami because the game doesn't give you the tools to do that. It's a bummer. What you can do is live out your pushing 40 Japanese man-child fantasies by chatting up barmaids, couch surfing everywhere in Japan, skating across town, only eating takeout and occasionally beating the shit out of high school bullies. In that aspect, the game works alright. Speaking of beating people up, one aspect in which Lost Judgment did improve upon the original was combat. In the original Judgment, controlling Yagami was pretty awful. There was a narrative reason for that. RGG wanted us to see the difference between a skilled Yakuza fighting and a civilian fighting. They have apparently realized that it's better to just have Yagami tell everyone that he's really good at Kung Fu for some reason and call it a day. Thank God. I'm pretty bad at beat-em-up games, so the whole he plays like shit for narrative reasons shtick really frustrated me. So having a more responsive character is a blessing. Still, I played Lost Judgment on normal and started out by buying every single SP boost skill available, and then I moved on to health and attack upgrades so that I could pretty much cruise through the game. And I still sucked at the game, as always. Give me any boss battle in a Yakuza game and I'll be spamming sushi sets left and right. This isn't Devil Leon 7. If you want to check some dude playing on legendary mode, go watch that. As one might expect from an RGG title, the main story is just a fraction of everything there is available to do in the game, as there is always some zany side crap for you to tackle. And oh boy, does Lost Judgment deliver on this front. I previously said that Yagami would have to infiltrate a high school to solve the main case in the game. Well, while there he gets roped into helping investigate a sudden spike in delinquency among influential students in the school. For this one, you will get the help of Kyoko Amasawa, who's the president of the school's Mystery Research Club. She's one tough cookie and probably much more useful than Kaito or Sugiura when it comes to solving mysteries and that sort of thing. If I had my way, she would definitely return as an intern in Yagami's agency in Judgment 3, really. Anyway, Amasawa believes that this increase in delinquency isn't by chance, and that a mysterious figure named the Professor is behind it all. Throughout the story, she will send you an assortment of files to investigate, each one focused on a different school club where delinquency is on the rise. These are identified in the main menu as school stories, and when you take all of them into account, you pretty much get a megazord of side content. This school stuff feels like if, in Yakuza 0 for instance, cabaret club, business management, and the disco dancing somehow merged into a single storyline at some point. It's the meatiest side story in the whole franchise, and it's pretty engaging on its own. I mean, the identity of the professor was obvious to me as soon as I unlocked my second or third school club, but that wasn't enough to spoil the fun. It's really gratifying to see every character you have helped join you up in the end for the conclusion of the story, and every key character gets a moment to shine. It's also thematically consistent with the main plot, so even though it can get wacky, as one might expect from an RGG title, it is still believable somehow, sort of. We get 4 major minigames: dancing, robot battles, boxing, and racing. These are the ones which are richer in content and will require skill to master, especially the one with the robot battles and the racing one. beating those two storylines was brutal, jeez. We also get a scathing subplot, which honestly could have been longer if you asked me, another raking to the hostess chats from previous games, and some other stuff that's shorter and you can wrap up in like an hour. All in all, this professor storyline took me almost as long as the main plot to wrap up, and I shit you not, at moments I felt even more compelled by this high school stuff than by the greedy crime drama involving Sawa-sensei. It kind of feels like one of those half-sequels Sony has been prancing around, except it's already in the game. It's a pity that not every cutscene from this plotline is voiced and animated, since this is side content, but I really recommend you try and beat all of these questlines, because the ending is really satisfying. And look, that's not all. Apart from the professor stuff, we still get all of those Sega arcade games, Master System games, darts, baseball, drone racing, virtual reality bullshit, dressing up bullshit, and a bunch of other non-professor related side quests and content with that distinct RGG tonal whiplash that we all love. I played for over 50 hours and still have a bunch of side quests and silliness to complete. What's not to love? Oh, do notice that you might experience this really weird bug that I've seen in both Lost Judgment and Yakuza Like a Dragon. The textures go wild and start pointing out of characters till infinity. It's pretty hilarious at first, but if it becomes too frequent in your playthrough, I can see how it could really affect your enjoyment of the game. Fortunately, in my case, it only happened a few times, so it didn't really bother me. But as always, it's important to notice that I played this on a PS4, so it might be some kind of hardware limitation, I don't know. And yes, that's why there's this annoying Sega watermark everywhere in the video. There's no workaround on PlayStation. At least none that I'm aware of. Oh well. So Lost Judgment misses the landing when it comes to its detective gameplay, but sort of makes up for it in combat. The main plot and the secondary one work really well and complement each other nicely. If you haven't played the game yet, know that I recommend it and think it's actually a great introduction to RGG and their addictive, if sometimes flawed, formula. If you have played the game, then please stick around because I would really like to talk about the plot and the message RGG is trying to convey regarding the story's central theme, because really it's sort of a mess for me. If you haven't played Lost Judgment yet, I recommend you go watch something else. My latest rambling maybe? Just remember to like the video and subscribe to my channel first. So it's not clear when you start out, but this game is all about bullying and how its consequences can reverberate through the years. Slowly, we'll find out that a bullying case happened 13 years ago in the same high school where Sawa-sensei and Yui Mamiya, the victim of the sexual battery case, used to study. That's an unlikely connection between both crimes, since the murder victim used to work in the same school where Sawa-sensei works now, Seirio High School. Further investigating this connection, we'll find out that there's a serial killer on the loose who's been murdering bullies who led their victims to unalive themselves all across Japan, and that before offing one of these bullies, he actually offers the parents of the unalived victims the chance to do the deed themselves, with Ehara, our accused on the sexual battery, having taken the killer up on this offer. You see, Ehara's kid was bullied by the murder victim Hiro Mikoshiba in Seirio High School 4 years prior. It was so bad that the kid unalived himself. There was a police investigation and all that, but all evidence of bullying was swept under the rug. Then Mikoshiba had the nerve to start working in education, nurturing a new generation of bullies who were severely underdeveloped in the story. Anyway, this got Ehara's blood boiling, so when the serial killer offered him the chance to commit the perfect crime and at the same time expose the flaws in the Japanese legal system, Ehara went with it. I thought this was an amazing setup, because you can really see how a deranged mind would come to a dark conclusion like this. Bullying is a societal issue that's so complex that no country has successfully been able to erase it, so I can understand how one could think taking the law into their own hands was the optimal solution. The problem for me is who is coming to these conclusions. If we were talking about a former bullying victim who wants to avenge those who weren't as lucky as them and can't speak for themselves anymore, I would have found the whole thing much more gripping. However, that's not what we get here. Our serial killer is actually a former teacher who lost his job after failing to see how a kid was bullied to the point where he tried to unalive himself and ended up in a coma. This former teacher then kidnapped this bully and offered the comatose kid's mother the chance to dispose of the bully, which she did. This woman then became this badass minister who's actually doing great work for the elderly in Japan, work that many on the Japanese diet don't want to see come to fruition. So the Public Security Division of the police wants to use this past murder to force her hand, and they will stop at nothing in order to accomplish this, including framing this insane teacher for a murder he actually didn't commit. This teacher I keep talking about is Kuwana the handyman. He used to teach Sawa-sensei, Mamiya, and the other masked men who attacked Yagami during different moments in the story. All of these people except Sawa used to be bullies, and now Kuwana is manipulating them to do his deeds, or else he will expose the dirt he has on them. All of this actually works really well too, especially considering the state of affairs in Asia right now. Mamiya states herself that she is now 30 years old and her life would be obliterated in front of her eyes for a juvenile mistake she made when she was 17, and that society would treat her as if she were abusive right now, not as a kid. All of that is totally reasonable when we've been seeing more and more people in Asian countries going through this type of scandal, especially entertainers in Japan and Korea. So that works as a plot point. I would have liked to see one or two of these former bullies simply say no to Kuwana to show that at least some of them have grown as people, but nope, they're all still trash. Fine. Even with a former teacher as the mastermind, the whole scheme is still pretty fascinating, but there is one major issue. Kuwana is framed in a really empathetic light, and I just don't get it. He's killed 5 people, instigated and aided in the murder of 2 more, and blackmailed a bunch of others to try and clear his guilty conscience because he was a really shitty teacher. And guess what? He wasn't just a shitty teacher to Ministry Lady's comatose kid, he was a shitty teacher to everyone in that school. He neglected Sawa's worries, he neglected to see how his other students were sort of trash, but hey, other than Kawaii, they still hadn't done anything overtly criminal. They were still redeemable. However, he never even tried to help kids like Akaike and Mamiya see the light. They were deemed bad apples from the get-go, and the game sort of sides with him on that. That sort of black and white worldview might be okay for society at large, but it's not okay for someone working in education. So Kuwana getting a free pass really irked me. His logic is extremely flawed. He sees Ministry Lady as this poor saint that he'll try and protect at all costs because that mean bully put her son in a coma. And then he helps her kill the bully in a horrific way, which, I don't know, seems to me a far more brutal action than what the bully has actually done. This is not even an eye for an eye type of vile justice. The punishment exceeds the crime. And I totally get what the game's trying to do here. Kuwana's idea is that these people, these bullies, should face more consequences than they are currently facing, which are basically none. That's the lost judgment in the title of the game. However, Kuwana surpasses what could be considered proper justice and goes overboard with it. He's judge, jury, and most of the time executioner for these bullies, without taking into account the innocent lives that are lost in his trail of destruction, including Sawa-sensei, who Yagami won't shut up about in the whole game. And his blind spot towards murders like Ministry Lady just goes to show how skewed his worldview is. That makes him unquestionably the villain of the game, not some sort of anti-hero or a nice guy who lost his way because he was put in an impossible situation. He's a disgraced teacher because of his own actions. One could say he was complicit in Ministry Lady's kids' bullying, since he did squat to solve it. So how come in the end, when Yagami lets Kuwana escape because public security will obviously kill him if they find him, Yagami expresses a fondness for Kuwana and acts like he's just some poor unlucky dude who will one day see the light? No! Kuwana is no better than Soma, who Yagami actively hates because of, you know. I don't understand why Kuwana gets a free pass. and I wouldn't be surprised if he showed up in a future game as someone on the run who sneakily helps Yagami or something, just because of the affection RGG shows him. I don't get it. Ministry Lady, on the other hand, I get that one. It was her son. She sort of has a right to be overtaken by anger, especially when the bully doesn't recognize her, which goes to show how little he had grown as a person after the bullying event occurred. But Kuwana? No, I'm sorry, he's trash. He's a kidnapper, a murderer, a torturer, and still somehow feels superior to his former students who he keeps blackmailing. So yeah, it's a pretty messy message regarding bullying, as we see a bunch of murderers in an empathetic light, and all bullying victims as innocent angels without any sort of agency, while teenage bullies are all absolutely irredeemable trash that are incapable of bettering themselves as people. What's up with that? Yeah, sure, those bullies from the beginning of the story all speedrun through a redemption arc, but really, they hadn't done anything severe up until Yagami showed up to even need any major redemption. A nice scolding from a teacher followed by an honest heart-to-heart between the bullies, and the bullied, mediated by a responsible, caring adult, would have been enough to patch everything up. I know I might be alone in that, as I've seen people online saying they would have loved to beat these kids up even more, so yeah, that's up for debate. Still, they got a free pass from RGG, everyone else is trash, it seems. You know what, the more I think about the main plot and its core message, the less I like it. Let's focus on the professor's nonsense instead, because that one is S-tier gaming. Let's get the rabbits to regionals, goddammit! And that's it for another review, everyone. Lost Judgment is crazy fun and has a nice little mystery at its heart. The message is trying to convey is sort of confusing, but that shouldn't bother you if you're a normal person that doesn't overthink everything like I do. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, comment down below if you agree with my analysis, and I'll see you on another video.